Father God, you caused all holy scriptures to be written for our learning. Help us to so hear them, mark, learn, and inwardly digest them, that by patience and the comfort of your holy word, we may embrace and always hold firmly to the blessed hope of everlasting life, which you have given us in our Saviour, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Our reading today is from 1 Peter 1, chapter 1, verses 13 to 25, and you can find it on page 1075 of your Pew Bibles. A call to holy living. Therefore, with your minds ready for action, be sober-minded and set your hope completely on the grace to be brought to you at the revelation of Jesus Christ. As obedient children, do not be conformed to the desires of your former ignorance, but as the one who called you is holy, you also are holy in all your conduct, for it is written, "Be holy, because I'm holy." If you appeal to the Father, who judges impartially according to each one's work, you are to conduct yourselves in reverence during your time living as strangers. For you know that you were redeemed from your empty way of life, inherited from your ancestors, not with perishable things like silver or gold, but with the precious blood of Christ, like that of an unblemished and spotless lamb. He was foreknown before the foundation of the world, but was revealed in these last times to you. Through him you believe in God, who raised him from the dead and gave him glory, so that your faith and hope are in God. Since you have purified yourselves by your obedience to the truth, so that you show sincere brotherly love for each other, from a pure heart, love one another constantly, because you have been born again, not of perishable seed, but of imperishable, through the living and enduring word of God. For all flesh is like grass, and all its glory like a flower of the grass. The grass withers, the flower falls, but the word of the Lord endures forever. And this word is the gospel that was proclaimed to you. Here ends reading.
Keep that open. Your family is weird. Did you know that? Yeah, you probably know that. Most people kind of get that anyway at some stage. But you really realise it, that you're weird. By weird I mean different. Well, you really realise that this is the case when you start to date someone or you marry someone, and after some time you realise that your way of doing things is very different from the way that they do things, and their family is very different. I do marriage preparation for couples getting married, and a lot of the course is essentially week after week of talking about expectations, setting expectations. That's what the marriage course is about. One couple that I had, the bride, they had a family holiday that they would go on, that the bride would go on with her extended family for weeks. It went on for a long time, I think, and in the discussions of marriage prep and expectations, it came up that it was assumed that the groom was going to go on this family holiday when they got married, and this was what they do. And they hadn't discussed this, of course, because it was just assumed that that's what you do. But his family was very weird, very different. They were perhaps less connected, or the way that they do things. Every family is weird in the sense that every family does things differently. Perhaps your family is more structured and planned, and the other family is not so structured and planned. Perhaps your family was more connected, and the other family is not so connected and isolated. But like it or not, the reason why I'm talking about this is that being part of God's family means that, in that sense, we are weird, or we are different. And that's what the theme of this passage is all about. It's about holiness. And holiness is about being part of a family that is different. That's what Peter is talking about in 1 Peter chapter 1, verses 13 through to 25. And the key verse is, we heard it read out earlier, was, "Be holy because I am holy." And when I say the word holy, you probably think, have I got it there? Be holy? There it is, yeah. You probably think, well, when we hear holy, we think holiness means behaviour and abstaining from things. You know, don't do this, don't do that, don't be unclean, don't touch this, don't engage in that. But holiness is actually, it's not less than that, but it's more than that. Holiness is actually about taking on the character of the family that you are part of. It's becoming more like the family of God. That's what holiness means. To resemble the family of God. And so taking on the family likeness means three things. And they're all in the passage, you'll see as we go through. Taking on the family likeness means we live as children of God, we fear the Father, and we love the brothers and sisters. Yeah. And I think actually in the Greek, I don't know, I'd have to check, it might say brothers and sisters. It's the collective word, adelphoi or something. I think it might be, but I'm not 100% sure. But afterwards anyway, you'll see later on, love the brothers, and it says love each other deeply. We'll see that later on. But the first thing, to take on the family likeness, is to live as children. The first one is to live as children of God. Have a look at verse 15, because Peter talks about being holy. Look at verse 15. As the one who called you is holy, you are also to be holy, or different, in all your conduct. For it is written, "Be holy because I am holy." To understand why Peter calls us children, we need to understand something about holiness as we start here. Have a look, verse 16. He says there, what does he say before "be holy because I'm holy"? What does it say there? I just like to do this so that we're listening. What does it say? For it is written. Peter's taking a verse from a book that he knows about called Leviticus, and it's about certain things. Now, when we think of holiness, we think inevitably of behaviour and of abstaining from things, perhaps morality, the 10 Commandments. But holiness is not less than that, but it's actually even more than that. Peter is saying, "Be holy for I'm holy." And where's he taking it from? It is written from a book called Leviticus. Now, have you been reading Leviticus lately? Probably not. Not that exciting. But I tell you what, in Leviticus, all it talks about is holy things. All through Leviticus, it talks about holy tables, holy pots, holy spoons, all of these things. Now, this forces us to think, what is Peter talking about here? What does holiness mean? If it means morality, if holiness is about behaviour and people, Peter's quoting from a book that talks about holy things. What sort of table would have morality? Or to be even scarier, what sort of table would it be that we sit at that's immoral? It's forcing us to think about holiness, not about just behaviour, but about something else. Holiness actually means being set apart for God and belonging to God. That's what Leviticus is all about. All of these things that belong to God. Totally unique, set apart for Him. If God is holy, which we understand that, God being separate and unique, separate from creation, be holy, meaning we belong to God. Listen to this commentator. He says this about Leviticus 11, Peter Lee. Of course, to be holy means moral behaviour. But these words in Leviticus 11, be holy for I'm holy, are not given in the context of moral command and prohibitions to people, but the context of ceremonial restrictions dealing with unclean and clean things for belonging to God, living on His terms, reserving ourselves for Him, delighting in Him, obeying Him. These are more fundamental than the specifics of obedience we label morality. What is he saying? What am I saying? He's saying behaviour and morality and all of these things are fruit and they're the outworkings, but more importantly, more fundamentally, holiness is about who we belong to, about belonging to someone, set apart. And this is why Peter says in verse 14, well, be holy for I'm holy, but he says, as obedient children. He's saying the first part of holiness, the first part of taking on the family likeness is recognizing we belong to God. We are His children. And so that changes everything, doesn't it? If holiness is about being His children, it means holiness it's intensely personal. And this is why Peter says, being born again, you are His children of the imperishable seed being born again. We can be moral for all sorts of reasons in life, can't we? Out of duty, because it makes us feel good about ourselves. Maybe pragmatically it's better. Honesty is the best policy. If we're in business or something, being truthful, and that surely will be better. But this changes everything, doesn't it? Holiness here is talking about loving someone because of their great love for you. Let me put it this way. There are certain people in our lives, in my life, that their claims of love are so great on me that I really belong to them. You know, like my wife and my family, there are people that their claims of love on me are so great that when I belong to them, and I do things, maybe I do things sometimes because maybe I don't want to do some things, but some of the things are done, but they're done out of the fact that I belong to them, out of that love. Do you see the difference with morality, how I was saying earlier? Out of duty because it makes us feel good about ourselves. But holiness is about who we belong to. And this is why Peter says in verse 14, you used to be ignorant, meaning you were far away from God, meaning you weren't known by God, you didn't know God. But even more than that, look at verse 18. It says we were redeemed from our former way of life. Redeemed means bought back. And notice how it says we're bought. What does it say there? It says, by the blood of the Lamb. Verse 18. And notice those little words afterwards. I want you to notice this. Look at what it says there. What are the words that it says after? I think it says after the blood of the Lamb, verse 18. Redeemed from your empty way of life. Verse 19. The precious blood of Christ. What are the words that he uses there? Look there. Like that of an unblemished and spotless lamb or sacrifice. Why does he choose those? Why is Peter emphasizing unblemished and spotless? Isn't that because it's saying Jesus is the perfect offering, you see? Isn't that interesting that we read the passage and we go, be holy for I'm holy, and we think, I have to be holy and it must be about my morality and I have to. But then later on, he says there's an unblemished and a spotless lamb. You see, we're supposed to recognize that's how I belong to God. That's how I am his child. Jesus the sacrifice has taken my place. All of the Leviticus and the stuff about the holy table and the holy bowls and all those things that are set apart for use by God, I belong to God, and we have been bought by the precious blood of the Lamb. When we recognise that the claim of love on us is so great that we belong to God because of his great sacrifice. It means knowing we are God's children, we are his through the sacrifice of what he has done. And so then we ask, how does that mean we live for God? You know, Peter talks about people being born again and being his child. It's not like you're either his child or you're not his child. It's an on-off thing. It's an on-off thing. We belong to God. These are the words that commentator said earlier. Belonging to God, living on his terms, reserving ourselves for him, delighting in him, obeying him. And so as Peter says, as obedient children, listen to God. We hear the word obedience and we think, oh, it's obedient. But he's saying as God's children bought by the precious blood of the Lamb because of the spotless, unblemished sacrifice, God has brought you home. And so we live as a child of God. Jesus says in John 17, I sanctify myself for their sakes so that they may be sanctified. Now, did Jesus become more whole? I sanctify myself. He's saying become God's people. Holiness means, and taking on the family likeness means recognising we are to live as a child of God. But now we also have a principle for holiness, because if we're bought by God, if we're his, if we belong to him, then we no longer live for ourselves, do we? Our principle is we're living for God and for self. This brings me on to the second aspect of taking on the family likeness, and it's in verse 17. Alongside living as children of God, we fear the Father. Notice in verse 17 it says there, if you address as Father the one who judges impartially based on each other's work, you are to conduct yourselves in fear during the time of your temporary residence. Now here it's talking about God, our Father, being a judge. And it says we are to fear the Father. Now, what does this mean? Fearing the Father doesn't mean we're forever looking over our shoulder, wondering, have we done enough to be right with God? It's not that, is it? Because Jesus has died for us, and that's how an orphan behaves. But what it does mean is that there are things that go on in our lives that God allows to discipline us. He'll bring things into our lives that mean we return back to him and we are to fear him above all things. So the word fearing the Father means, it's kind of this idea about worship and idol worship. Who do we live for first? Who do we have set apart in our hearts first? It means we live for God and we worship him first and we put him first in our lives. Holiness will mean being bought and belong to God, bought by a price. But this means there'll be things in our lives where we may fear. We may fear losing approval from someone, or we may fear losing out on wealth and the security that brings. But Peter is saying, remember, you used to live via the empty way of life. That's the forefathers. That's in verse 18. The forefathers chased after the things of the world, considering if you stockpile enough, or if you have enough of this, you'll be satisfied. But Peter's saying that's an empty way of life. The way to live is to fear God and to put him first. And now that means we're no longer orphans, we're children of the Father. It means we know that there are things that God will bring in our lives. They're not random. but things that will happen in our lives that will cause us to turn away from those things that we think are going to give us satisfaction, and we're to turn toward God and to fear Him. God, as a good Father, allows things to grow us, and He allows us to be reminded about what He has done. And when things happen in our lives, we recognise we're not foolish enough that God has abandoned us just because bad things are going on. No, we know that we are His children because He loves us because of what Jesus has done. But God reminds us, or I should say Peter reminds us, that to take on the family resemblance is to be someone who belongs to God as a child. Remember, you're a child of the Father. It is to come back to Him and to keep fearing Him and putting Him first in your life. There'll be things that you know that you're putting first, that you're really chasing, and that God is saying to you, it's time for you to put those aside. Light in me. To resemble the family, we are to remember we are children. We are to remember that we are to have the Father first in our lives. And lastly, we are to love each other deeply. Look at verse 22. By obedience to the truth, having purified yourselves, for sincere love of the brothers, love one another earnestly from a pure heart. Did you think that being holy had anything to do with love of each other? It doesn't sound like something. It sounds like a very singular thing, holy before God, but it's actually manifests itself by loving each other deeply. This is what it looks like to be set apart for God, to live for God and to love others deeply. This only comes from a heart of a people who are regenerated from the inside out. Those who know that they have been born again and that they've been loved by God, bought at a price, they can be people who love each other deeply. Notice the words there in verse 22, it says, sincere love, deeply from the heart. This only happens from people who continually drink from God's grace and are reminded that we are in because of what God has done. Because you know the word holy, when we think of holy, don't we think of, shouldn't holiness produce a holiness than thou attitude, toward others? Generally, that's what it would be, because you're loved by God, you're in by God because of what you've done and through His grace. And so this doesn't cause a holier than thou attitude, it causes a sincere love from the depth of the heart to each other. And that's what he says there in verses 23 to 25. Listen, he says, you've been born again, not of the perishable seed, but of the imperishable, through the living and enduring Word of God. Remember Jesus' holiness, the unblemished, spotless lamb. He was different, but did that make him go away from sinners or people he was someone who was drawn to sinners. He was someone who loved others who were outcasts and who were different. It made Jesus more and more God's vehicle for grace. And remember the Pharisees had it all together. They had all the behaviour right, from the outside in. And Jesus called them whitewashed tombs. This is why it says in 1 Peter, when you've been purified, made holy, you are to have sincere love that comes from the heart. And this is what lasts into the new creation. Imagine a church of people who love each other from the heart, who display genuine love of each other. Imagine what that looks like. Imagine the community. Wouldn't that be a place that you would love to be? And a place that you would love to serve? And as I said, it comes from the heart. It means that we're going to be hurt. It means that people are going to misunderstand. It means that we'll get in each other's way. But we're reminded each week, I'm serving so that I can get something out of it, or I'm serving because it makes me feel better about myself. No, I'm serving because God's loved me. How are some of the ways that we would love each other from the heart? There are very simple ways. I mean, you could probably think of numerous ways that you could do that. There may be that there are people that you notice that haven't been to church for a while. It might be a simple way of just ringing them up and seeing how they're going. It may be that you'll be a place where your home is a place of hospitality. You'll have your place open. It'll just be this place that will actually cost quite a bit nowadays, doesn't it, with hospitality? But it might be a place that you would have open and a place that you would allow people to come into your home. And maybe that we'd start doing that more at church. We'd have lunches afterwards and maybe you'd help organise that, I don't know. But maybe that would be how we would do sincere love of each other and care of each other. There are myriad of ways that we could do that. 1 Peter reminds us that we are his children, that we are to look to the Father, and that we are to love each other sincerely from a pure heart. Notice just at the end of that little verse there, verse 22, he says, love one another constantly. It's not easy. It's not meant to be. Verse 25, the word of the Lord that endures forever, and this word is the gospel that was proclaimed to you. The gospel, if you're not sure, is the simple message of Jesus and what he has done. And that message is the message that is in the past and rooted in history, but it's a living message that is to transform our hearts and is active in our community because of what God has done. Holy people aren't people who have it all together with the behaviour and abstaining from things and unpolluted from the world. And holy people are people who know that they are children of the Father, who love God and want to exalt God in their hearts first. And they're people who want to love each other from a pure heart. Let's pray. We ask, Lord, that you would help us in this. We hear the call again, and we recognise the task, and yet we ask that you would help us to see more of your grace. Please, Father, let us not be burdened by this or overcome, but instead recognise the relational aspect of what you have done, of how you have personally called each one of us, and help us to recognise ways in which we can enthrone you in our hearts this week. We can live for you, and that we